Here we go.
Good evening, and welcome to this evening's Cambridge Community Conversation. As you know, these conversations provide an opportunity for the people of Cambridge to hear from the leaders in our city and to ask questions and express concerns about issues related to Cambridge. The conversations are sponsored by WHCP Radio 101.5 FM, from whose studios the conversations are broadcast, as well as the Cambridge Association of Neighborhoods, or CAN, the Dorchester Banner, and the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce. I'm Tom Puglisi of CAN. Providing technical assistance tonight are Beth Klein of CAN, whom you probably know from the Blue Awning, Julian Jackson and Doug Sheets of WHCP are providing technical support. We have tonight the city manager of Cambridge, Mr. Patrick Comiskey, who will talk to us and answer our questions about things going on in city government in Cambridge. Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, Tom. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Patrick Comiskey. I'm the Cambridge city manager, and I've been asked to come tonight to answer questions about the city government in Cambridge. My wife and I reside on Willis Street, and I appreciate this chance to give information about our city government.
All right. Sounds great. Patrick, can you tell us how COVID-19 has affected Cambridge? As city manager, I'm sure you've been presented with a whole host of issues that result from the epidemic or pandemic that we're now experiencing.
Tom, the biggest impact, as everyone knows, has been the effect on our local economy. Our businesses, most of them have been interrupted to some degree. We've had people concerned about contracting the virus. Our health department has taken a leadership role to try to help mitigate any issues and also to address any concerns of the public. We've had at the initial outset of the virus, we at City Hall, the mayor and council, we had put our employees into two teams. We began trying to basically have a platooning system where half the workers were on one week and then half were on the next week. And then our police department officers were in the patrols were broken into 5 shifts where they rotated on 24-hour on for 7 days a week, and then had 2 weeks where they were off. So those are some of the biggest impacts. Of course, when the economy hits us, then of course our revenues are also adversely affected like everybody else.
So how has that affected the city budget?
Well, one of the things that we've had to do was to try to estimate what the impact is going to be. And so we looked at the various areas we thought would be impacted. First would be areas where we currently receive aid from the state. We get about $1 million a year from the state for 2 major areas. One is for highway user funds, and the other is for police service protection funds. And during the last recession over a decade ago, we had suffered immensely from that. And we anticipate that that's going to happen to us again. We know in the last year that the state reduced what they had originally told us in highway user funds. They reduced that estimate by $77,000 approximately. And we anticipate that it's going to be much deeper this year. The second area would be our revenues that come from income taxes and personal property taxes. We know if people's businesses aren't doing well, and from what we hear nationally, that we've had 1 in 5 people that have been laid off during this recession and pandemic, that's going to adversely affect income taxes that are paid to the state, of which we in the county receive a portion of that. And probably another area that we thought would be adversely impacted, which initially was in our marina activity. You know, we operate our own city marina, and in the initial phases of the coronavirus, the state closed boating activities and restricted them. But about part of the way through it, they unleashed those restrictions. And so it's interesting that boating activity has probably one of the best ways to get out of your town or your house is to get on your boat. You can go visit places and you don't have to worry about going into a hotel room. And then, of course, the biggest area of all is, the Hyatt is our largest employer, and the Hyatt contributes a sizable chunk to a room tax and also entertainment taxes. And so we have seen, we were anticipating that we were going to lose as much as $250,000 in the last quarter of the last fiscal year by having the Hyatt closed for 3 months and other hotels in the area being adversely impacted. And we also, the entertainment that goes with that, golf course and using the facilities at the Hyatt. And then this coming year, after talking to the Hyatt manager, they have to be conservative in their projections. And so as a result, we're anticipating a major hit in hotel taxes in the coming year.
So are these budget problems going to result in any reduction of city employees, or are we going to be able to maintain the staff that we have now in the city?
Well, Tom, what we had talked about, the mayor and council and myself, we talked about was trying to see if we could avoid laying employees off and furloughing employees, which unfortunately that tends to be a reality in recessions. And it was no different when the last recession hit Cambridge before, was we had to lay people off and furlough workers. And we're going to try our best to attrition staff and see if we can avoid that. And over time, attritioning plus borrowing an amount of funds that we think could get us through 2 years of reduced revenues and hold our carryover funds that we have in the bank to help us through the years 3 and 4. Hopefully we will be able to mitigate that and be able to avoid those kind of things you don't like to do.
So have any decisions been made about the amount of loans that might be needed and how long these loans may take to pay back?
We had originally targeted approximately $2 million, and we're going to watch to see how our revenues are adversely affected and see if we can get an idea on when this virus is going to come under control and when we're going to be back to normal activity. And then, of course, the resulting recession, how deep we think that'll be. And we were hoping to make those decisions around Thanksgiving time when we have a better idea of how our revenues are impacted, and then make a decision about the amount of money we hope to borrow. The thought is that we were going to borrow for a period of 20 to 25 years. And of course, now money is about as available as you can hope to have at lower interest rates. So we had already talked to local banks about attaching some of our city assets to a loan, and we were looking at a 20 to 25 year note.
Do you think that city services will have to be cut because of the pandemic? And if so, what cuts are in the works, or what cuts do you think might have to be made?
We're hoping, Tom, that we won't have to, people will not see an adverse impact on services. A couple of things we're looking to try to do is buy some equipment that should help us with manpower issues. We're looking at trying to get a sweeper truck. That the council will be looking at that very soon. Also, we were looking at getting a clamshell truck to help pick up garbage. And also when we have storms, and a wood chipper that will also help us to reduce the amount of manpower it takes to deal with situations such as yard debris after storms. And on a normal basis, reduce the number of manpower it takes to pick up special goods that are left at the curbside and special pickup.
Okay. The ban on evictions is about to expire. Does the city have any plans to address evictions that occur in the city? And what do you think the city can do to help its citizens who are unable to pay rents or pay the course costs that result from evictions? This particular question comes from Barbara Knepp. Citizens who are unable.
One of the things that people may not realize is that the city is also affected by some of the bans. One of them is on utility payments. With the electricity, water, and sewer are also impacted. And so we are in a situation where we're not able to collect late fees. We're not able to shut people's services off. Of course, we're sympathetic to tenants that are out of work. And we know that stimulus money is only going to go so far. We're hoping that they will continue some of those programs on the federal level so people will be able to maintain their payments. But at the same time, too, is they're sympathetic to landlords that people have invested money in their properties and they can't collect. And so it's a challenge for everybody, not just the tenants, but also landlords and utility companies. But unfortunately, there's only limited amounts we can do on our end to help with somebody with paying their rent for their homes.
Sure.
Or for their rental units.
Sure. Let's move on to a different topic. I've heard that the city has recently undergone a reorganization of its administrative structure, but I haven't seen very much detail about what the nature of the reorganization is and who's heading various departments and so forth. Could you briefly describe the city reorganization and the administrative structure and tell us who heads the different departments now?
Certainly, Tom. We basically streamlined the management, and more people report directly to the manager now than before. We have the three main departments. We have the police department, we have the MUC, and we have the administrative department. What had been the public works department, we divided that up into the divisions, and having the divisions report to the manager who heads the administration department. We have building safety. We have Susan Webb. She heads up that unit. And one of the things that we're doing with the reorganization is her division is going to be moving over to City Hall, and she's going to be having offices in City Hall. One of the advantages to that was we were hoping to, prior to COVID, we were going to start putting more requirements in for inspections when you renewed your rental licenses with the city. If you hadn't had one before, you were going to be required to do a inspection of your property. So that would affect new landlords and landlords that take over new properties from former landlords. We also were looking at potentially having provisions where to get water service turned on, you had to have an inspection. And of course, having the people down the hall from where you sign up for those services made a lot of sense and would hopefully also allow our people who are in the field, the people who are involved with meter reading and meter replacement, to be on a day-to-day basis communicating with inspectors who would be able to learn issues in the field that they may not have seen, such as new permit activity going on that hasn't been registered and those kind of things. But a big part, we were hoping to be able to facilitate inspections. With COVID going on, we have tried to keep employees from going into people's homes, and we've tried to do things that would protect our employees from being exposed to the virus. Another area that we had set up was we set up an economic development division, which prior to had reported to the planning director. Now the economic development director reports to the city manager. We have the engineering division. The engineer now reports to the manager, and Carol Richardson is our economic development director, and George Hyde, who's our engineer, is reporting to the manager. We have the IT division director, which Dale is the IT director, and Dale reports to the city manager. We have the planning division, Pat Escher. She reports to the city manager, and she no longer has to worry about the economic development division. The police department, of course, is headed by the police chief, and inside his department, he has divisions for patrol and for special operations and administration. In public works, we have Ina Holden. She is the public works superintendent. She's the head of the public works division, and reporting to her are the street workers, the sewer workers, the garbage people that are workers who pick up the non-traditional garbage. And we also have the building and grounds workers who also report to her. And then you have the fire rescue company, which is headed by the chief, the fire chief, who is elected by the fire department membership. And they're the fire chief is approved by the mayor and council. Those are the divisions that we have, and we feel that that they're being as effective, if not hopefully more effective, as we get through COVID. We will hopefully be able to do some of the things we were hoping to do before COVID.
So all of these division director positions have now been filled, and we don't have any major vacancies heading these divisions. Is that right?
That's correct, Tom.
Okay. One question that seems to come up from time to time is whether or not any consideration has been given to combining the city and county police forces. Some people think there might be cost savings advantages to that kind of a combined force. What's your position on that?
Well, Tom, there's a lot of information out there on agencies that have done that, or school boards, city governments, and county governments, and different agencies. And typically what you'll find is that there isn't a savings. The one advantage that you may achieve through that is you could potentially hire a more prominent chief. You might be able to have a specialty position that reports to the chief. But in general, when school boards or city governments and county governments consolidate, there usually isn't a savings. I'll tell you some examples just because you're talking about merging two bureaucracies. And you know that, for example, say it's police departments. Typically, you'll have one set of workers that are making a different wage rate than the other agency. So when you bring two agencies together, what do you think is going to happen? You think you're going to lower the one agency to the other one, or are you going to raise the one up? And same with all the different benefits and the insurance and those things. You typically end up during the merger process committing to giving everybody, not taking anything away from somebody, which usually results in people getting more than what they had going into the merger. And so that's one area you usually don't have a change. Also for the smaller entity, or maybe the one agency that doesn't have in the driver's seat. So for instance, if we merged with the sheriff department, the sheriff would be the person leading the show. And typically the response of an official reporting to the smaller entity or the local entity is going to be more responsive because that's their whole role, is just that entity. Now, when you merge other entities, you're going to tend to have less response for the one of the agencies. Probably an example that I might give on that I've people talk about and we've tried to consider is animal control services. Do we think that animal control services, if we had local, if we had a division inside the city, would they be more responsive or less responsive than having it as a consolidated county function? And as this isn't any criticizing any particular agency, these things go on all over the country, and this argument or not argument, this discussion and discourse goes on consolidation. And I think that probably we would find that it wouldn't be a savings, and it might actually, one agency, former agency, political division may feel that they aren't getting as much control or support or response that they did prior to.
What about animal control? I've heard anecdotal complaints from citizens about the animal control services not being very responsive to folks inside the city. Have you had similar complaints?
Yeah, I've had, being a dog owner and interacting with a lot of dog owners. In fact, I think my dog is more popular and more well-known in town than I am. We've met a lot of people and got a lot of feedback on this topic. And typically one of the first issues is there's only so much that any dog enforcement can do, or animal control. But typically this would go back to what we were talking about as far as responsiveness. You would tend to have more, but we'd have to, at the city level, would have to come up with a funding mechanism to hire, say, special details for that. And unfortunately, right now, with the coronavirus and the ensuing recession, it's a tricky time for us to consider adding or trying to change a service level. But we would need to have some kind of a funding source to do that. And that's something we'd have to try to sit down and talk about first. And once this coronavirus and recession's over, that's probably something that incoming council members next year can start having a discussion as to what they think and what we might be able to do or to enhance that relationship or to try something different from what we're currently doing.
Does the police department in Cambridge have any responsibility in either animal control or the enforcement of COVID-19 guidelines?
Well, if there's a loose animal, they'll try to go out and do what they can, but usually we rely on having the animal control come in and handle the situation. But as far as the COVID response, what our officers have tried to do is we've tried to enforce the spirit of the rules that Governor Hogan has requested of us. And early on in his request for local enforcement, we heard from our local prosecutor that it was reported that the city of Cambridge Police Department was one of the more active in trying to respond to COVID cases. What our police chief has had as a directive to the officers is if they are called, in general, the first action is to alert the health department and allow Mr. Harrell and his staff to try to respond and deal with the situation as the first response. If a case comes up again and there's a repeat occurrence, then they will try to respond and issue a warning. If our officers are called to a scene and somebody is not following the guidelines, then they will issue a warning also. But not if they're going down the street and they see somebody doesn't have their face mask on, they're not initially responding to that. But I think if you'd find that if you looked at other policing agencies, at least what we had heard was that our force has been more responsive than most in the state and trying to adhere to the governor's directives on enforcement.
You alluded to some of the issues that the city workforce has faced in terms of protecting the workforce from the COVID-19 virus. Have there been any problems with employees contracting COVID-19 or requiring isolation, or has the modified operation of the city government unfolded fairly smoothly in that regard?
We've been very fortunate, Tom. We have not had any reported cases of a city worker. We've had people, of course, who've had connections that have been diagnosed, but we have been fortunate that we have not had that issue. And where our city hall and other buildings are still not open to the general public. We're having all of our meetings by remote using the town hall streams and conference call numbers to do our meetings. We're trying to have staff deal with customers through the drop boxes and work on the phone and do conference calls and those kind of measures to address their own safety.
What about the effectiveness of town hall streams and the call-in mechanisms for these meetings? I think there's been some frustration amongst citizens about the inability to get through to ask questions. I've heard complaints about not being able to understand what commissioners are saying when they call in remotely, and the inability to hear questioners or commenters comments when they call in. Have you looked at any other mechanisms for improving the productivity and the user friendliness of folks wishing to participate in city meetings?
We've tried to. Initially, we looked at utilizing Zoom and then found out that the city of Denton had a serious problem with the Zoom program. And then we received information from the municipal league that they recommended we don't try it because there were cases all over that were having problems. So we went with the program through Google, and we tried to take advantage of the camera that we have with our town hall streams. And the one challenge we have is when you call in, we encourage people to continue to call the phone number at the mayor's desk. And if you don't get a response, call back, and don't leave a message, but call back until you get through. Because if you watch the tapes, you'll see the mayor tries to give ample time for people to be able to get their call in. And so that's one of the things I recommend is they continue to call if they don't get through, because there is a delay. And if you keep calling, she'll pick up. On the other side, as far as other systems, if people have ideas, we will try to take note of them and try to see if there's something we can do. Dale, who's our IT person, I think if you look at the meetings we've had since the beginning of COVID, we've improved in the sound and the quality of the meetings. And we're trying to utilize muting people who are in the call to try to keep echoing and those kind of sounds from disrupting things.
Okay. We look forward to any improvements the city might be able to implement regarding those meetings, especially improving the audibility of the commissioners themselves when they speak and when they're speaking remotely. The city elections are coming up on October 17th, and we all know that there was initially a problem with having the city election correspond to the national election, and I think people understand why the dates had to be changed. But a couple of the city commissioners have raised some pretty vocal objections to the way the election is to be run. Are there any plans to change any of the election procedures at this point?
Tom, what we're planning on, the biggest thing that we were able to accomplish that we hoped for was, well, let me just, I guess, give you a little backdrop. In the fall, we went ahead and we tried to solicit vendors. We tried to get the county to do it, but they were going to be too tied up with their presidential election, and that was understandable. And the earliest, the best they could do for us was to try to have elections in June and July. So we went ahead and we had, we talked with them, and we even talked about doing a mail-in ballot, which would be a lot more expensive. And the latest they thought they could be able to do that, if they were able to get permission from the state, would be in August. And when we changed our charter 4 or 5 years ago, we changed the terms to, instead of turning over in the summer, they were going to turn over in January, like the presidential terms. So we would be in a situation where we have somebody elected and potentially not able to take office for 5 or 6 months. And so the commissioners decided we were going to try to move that election time frame up to initially the October, and if we need a runoff, we'll do that the 1st of December for any of the seats. So we went ahead and tried to find somebody who would help us. We tried to solicit people, and then we sent out an RFP and around Christmas time, and we had 3 vendors we were talking to. We ended up, I had the 3 people that I asked to be judges to sit in on the interview of True Ballot, which we did in January. We also initially tried to have the elections held at Governor's Hall. And unfortunately, they asked for over $12,000 to have the elections there for the 2 dates that we needed. So we decided to look at another venue. And at our meeting, when we interviewed the True Ballot in January, the 3 judges and I, and along with our assistant city attorney, we talked about we had 2 other places that we looked at. One was the school board building, their main office building, and another one was at Chesapeake College. And Chesapeake College offered to have the elections for no charge. And we saw it as being in the center of our downtown and closer to more of the electorate who could walk. And we decided that we wanted to recommend to council that we choose Chesapeake College. The council reviewed the matter in February at the first council meeting in February, and voted 3-2 to have the elections moved to Chesapeake College. And we have, we reviewed the situation again with. I did with our judges, and they decided that they felt that we shouldn't pay fees to Governor's Hall, and that Chesapeake College would be a fine facility. And so we're, and then one of the positive things that we were able to with the help of the county manager, Keith, and with Roger at the health department and the other members of the county COVID committee, I talked with them about helping us do an all mail out ballot, and they agreed to help us with that additional cost, which is going to be substantial compared to what we were originally looking at to have a traditional election. So we're going to mail out the ballots to almost 8,000 registered voters in the city, and they won't have to do anything. The ballot will come directly to them, or they have their registration address with the county. And that's probably the biggest change in the positive that we've made. And our election judges, our head judge is Jerry Burrows. Our other two judges are Portia Ennels and Michael Wheatley. We have three alternate judges, Lynn Stewart and Barbara Brooks and Adrian Holmes, who will fill in if one of the three judges can't help in their role of any kind of disputes that come up. They'll be reviewing those.
Well, how much roughly does the mail-out ballot cost, and what percentage of that cost is the city shouldering versus other sources of funding?
Well, the additional cost to do the mail outs we're estimating it to be approximately in the low 20,000s to do each one. If we have to do a runoff, then there'll be another 20,000+. We are going to also have costs related to COVID because we're going to be doing things at Chesapeake College to try to protect people who come in, to protect our poll workers and judges. And we have a subcommittee that we're going to have working on just that. Brandon, who represents Chesapeake College, is going to be on that, helping us with that. And we're going to try to have two entrances into the facility and feed people in based on social distancing, provide masks, and have some protective barrier between the workers and judges and the people coming in, and have one exit to accommodate it. So those are some of the measures that we're taking. So those bills we're hoping to be paid 100% from the COVID committee, as I discussed with them a little while back.
That's terrific. So when do you think mail-in ballots will go out, be mailed to citizens, and when can they be mailed back? And is there a deadline for getting the ballots in?
Tom, what we're looking at doing is according to our charter, we have the 2nd of September is the last day you can qualify. We have, I believe, 7 days where a citizen could challenge somebody who's qualified. And then our consultant, True Ballot, our contractor, he's wanting 10 business days to be able to get the ballots printed and mailed out to our citizens. So they should expect those ballots in the later part of September, and they should try to mail those in as soon as they get them. The ballots will have there won't be a requirement of any stamp on the citizen. They can open the ballot. They'll be able to fill out the ballot, put it in the one envelope, sign the information that'll go in the second envelope, and just drop it in the mailbox, and the postage will be picked up by the city. It'll be picked up by the COVID committee, who will reimburse the city. And they should try to turn those in as soon as they can. The ballots have to be to us by election day. If somebody loses it, they can contact our office about getting a second ballot sent to them. And also, if they want to come in the day of the election, they can do that also.
So ballots have to be actually received by the city at the post office by election day?
That's correct. The post office, we're going to be going by the post office the day of the election on Saturday, the 17th. And the postal workers will bring out the boxes with the ballots in them. They will, prior to that, they will give them locks to seal the slots that they'll be sliding them into. And then they will bring them out to us, and we will load those and bring those down to Chesapeake College, where they'll be put back where the True Ballot people are until 7 o'clock when the polls close. And then True Ballot will begin their counting. They'll open those boxes with the keys that they'll have, and they will begin the counting.
So the ballots at the post office will be secured while they're in the post office?
That's correct. They'll once they get them in, we'll be providing the post office with boxes that they will have slots in them, and the postal workers will slide them into those slots, and they will be there at the post office until Election Day. And at Election Day, we'll give them locks to lock the front part. The back part will already be locked, and the front part where the slot is, there's a little thing that'll flip over, and they will lock those and put those into and then they'll put those on they'll have they've got a little pull cart. They'll bring them out back, and we will load those into a vehicle to take over to Chesapeake College, where they'll be secured until 7 o'clock, when the true ballot people will unlock those locks, and they will take the ballots out for counting.
So ballots cannot be counted beforehand. Before Election Day, they have to be counted after. Counting begins after 7 o'clock on Election Day. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
So how long do you think it will take for the ballot counting to take place? And when do you expect the election results to be available?
Our vendor has told us that he suspects that based on his experience, and John Siebel has said that he himself has done over 1,000 elections in his career. He said it'll take us probably about 3 hours to count those ballots. He's got a machine that he'll run those through and scan them.
Okay. Will candidates have observers during the counting of the ballot?
Yes, each candidate will be afforded the opportunity of an observer, and that observer we expect will be able to walk with us if they want to up to the post office and watch us get the ballots and put them in a vehicle to be transported to the Chesapeake College polling site.
Okay, thanks very much for your answers. I think that clears up a lot of questions that I had about how the election is to be run, and I hope our citizens find that those answers to be helpful as well. Turning to the economics of Cambridge, the street closures on Poplar Street on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, and the dining that has taken place in the streets seem to have been something that both the community and the restaurants have been in favor of and enjoyed. Is this something that might be expanded after the coronavirus is passed? How's that going to unfold?
Well, Tom, we had some differing opinions on it, and I think in general you're correct. People have been happy with the result. It's given our restaurants an opportunity to have outdoor seating, which citizens prefer over going inside because of the virus. We've tried to keep a corridor there for service vehicles, fire and ambulance if they need to get into the area, and we've had a couple challenges, a couple glitches with that. But I think in general that we'll continue this until the state of emergency is passed. The virus is either we've got a cure or the virus is mutated and it is no longer causing us the issues. But I think afterwards, it's going to be an issue that needs to be directed first to our planning commission to review the ideas of setting up these parking spaces and putting structures in there. And they'll probably want to have some input on that, and then probably have to be re-brought up to city council so that the council can ultimately decide how they feel about it. Because we've had a couple, business owners that don't like having the street closed, and some may not like the parking spaces being taken. And, that's a part of the dialogue that'll start with hopefully with the planning commission, as well as the aesthetics of what they put in.
Okay. Something to look forward to.
Yes.
Can you give us an insight into how the Pine Street revitalization plan is progressing and how you see it unfolding in the future?
Well, I think one of the positives on this project, Tom, is we have the benefit of having Habitat for Humanity, the Chop-Tank chapter, working with us as a partner. They are much more experienced in building and houses and renovating houses, and they've already done several houses on High Street. And we're in the process now of council recently approved demolishing 4 houses. We have a contractor that was given approval the other night to do so. So people will see that happen. We've acquired some properties with our partners in this project, the county government. They have been good about working with us to help us secure properties that need to be demolished or fit into our hopeful revitalization plan of building replacement houses on those in this project. And so another step we had was, we put in for 2 grants to upgrade the park at Cornish Park. We had an issue where we had to determine the property, who owned it. And like a lot of grant applications where it's competitive, we didn't get it the first time, but we now know where our weak spots were, and we're confident we're going to get a grant to help do that the next time, which would be a year from now. And so hopefully we'll be able to revitalize the park. We're also working on we're getting some movement now on, hopefully we're going to be having some forward progress on building that building for Mr. Beasley on the corner of Wells and Pine. They're having another meeting, I think tomorrow on that, trying to get the amounts needed for the loans to get that in motion to start seeing something happen there. So we're hoping we're excited. We also have recently brought on board a new housing specialist to work with Pat Escher and with Rodana Fields and those city commissioners that are working hand in hand with the committee that's working on this project. And we're hoping that that she'll be starting next week, and we'll be able to start getting her involved actively in this project.
That's great to hear. As a resident of Willis Street, I know you're acutely aware of the flooding that takes place along the river on Water Street, Chop Tank, West End, Willis, Belvedere, Oakley. What are the plans for dealing with the increasing problems with flooding in these areas?
Of course, there's a couple issues there. Of course, the flood holding back or retaining the flood waters. The other is the impact it has on our sewer system and the lift station that handles it down at Deep Harbor. The first issue, as far as the flood walls, the city engineer was able to secure a grant to work on our flood walls. 2 of those walls are going to be worked on hopefully within this fiscal year. The one is at the Oakley flood wall, and the other one is at Chop Tank. Also, we were fortunate to have a citizen who with a lot of experience, who's semi-retired engineer, who moved to Cambridge, who's had a lot of extensive experience on major government projects. And he has volunteered to help us try to secure FEMA money to help us come up with a plan and a mitigation strategy. And he helped us put in that's Mr. Larry White, who helped us put in a grant for FEMA funds of $250,000, which we applied for in December. And we're fortunate each state is able to put one applicant forward to the federal government. And thanks to his legwork and phone calls and knowledge and inside experience, we were able to become Maryland's application this year for the $250,000. So if we get chosen, of course, we'll be using that money to develop a plan. We've also recently been fortunate to have another experienced citizen who has extensive knowledge, and that's Colin. Let me make sure I get Colin Vissering. He is a recent resident to Cambridge, and he has worked for FEMA and has a lot of experience in projects as a consultant as well as a FEMA worker. And those 2 are going to help team up to try to put in a next phase application to hopefully that we'll get this one to plan. We'll get the next one to try to do a lot more work. There are 2 areas that we want to focus on is trying to contain the creek behind the town, as well as the water coming in off the Chop Tank, and come up with some kind of a revised flood wall to help us there. And then also to try to do an upgrade to our sewer lift station at Deep Harbor that handles the flow, and also to do some work on replacing sewer lines to get the I&I water that comes in from going to that lift station and creating issues potentially there. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to see some positive results by having these 2 volunteers that basically have come forward.
That sounds great. It's good to hear that progress is being made on this issue, because I know it's been a concern for a lot of people for a very, very long time. Yes. What can you tell us about the status of the Packing House and Cannery Park projects? How is that progressing, and what's the time frame for us to see some concrete results of those projects?
Well, Tom, earlier this year, we were fortunate to receive a grant for over $500,000 to hire a consultant to do a design and start doing a phase one of the Cannery Park project itself. Recently, we've assigned a worker, one of our city workers who has experience in landscaping work in the private sector, to work with Pat Escher to start trying to get some of the things on the checklist moving. So while the consultant is designing, he can actually be out there getting some things accomplished. We also have been working with Cross Street Partners they're the lead on getting that packing house building going. The state put in, I think, over $600,000 to improve those smokestacks, and they've already committed another $500,000 into that building. And the Hogan administration has committed and the state housing secretary has committed to putting in an Eastern Shore office for state workers in that packing house. We have been working with both parties. Cross Street Partners is trying to get a 50-50 economic development matching grant. The mayor and council last December approved committing in $250,000 towards the project, which will include infrastructure work, upgrading the Dorchester Street between Cedar and Washington Streets, putting sidewalks in there, also upgrading the sewer connection, and the MUC committed a share towards upgrading the water meter and connection for the building. Cross Street Partners wants to try to get stormwater attention and also improve some stormwater collection there, upgrading the inside of the building to some degree, and improving the roofing and the structure. We've put in a quarter. The state's put in $500,000. The federal government, we're expecting, will match those. And Cross Street Partners is trying to get additional funding sources. They also have tried to secure tenants, and the state is now the lead tenant. But they've also had some other prospects that we're hoping will commit as they see work on the building. Recently, the city has worked with the state to try to secure a high-speed internet and cable service into the building. We were going to have a contract soon that the council will be reviewing to it's a $100,000 grant from the state to put those services in that building, and also in the Cannery Park common area that'll be a part of the park behind the packing house.
So you just mentioned sidewalks in the context of the packing house project. Sidewalks are a real sore point for a lot of residents of Cambridge. We have a lot of neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks at all. A lot of people buy houses in Cambridge and find out to their surprise that they're responsible for maintenance of the sidewalks. Are there any long-range plans for Cambridge to address the sidewalk problem that we have throughout the city?
Tom, commissioners have talked about some different ideas. Of course, the way the rules work here is the property owner, as you alluded to, is responsible for maintaining the sidewalk in front of their residents, business owners in front of their business. The city has one of the ideas that we think may be an effort that we should try to do is to go in and identify problem sidewalks, give property owners long-term notice to try to address them, maybe try to somehow put a lien towards the property of an estimated cost, and then let it sit there at worst. If the property owner doesn't address it over a lengthy period of time that we give, is to make sure that if the property changes hands, that's dealt with in the negotiation on the property sale to a new buyer, that they know when they come in that they're going to have to deal with that sidewalk. Now, we're trying to figure out a mechanism to get that thing rolling, but that seems to be, in my opinion, the best solution that we can try to do on the long-term basis to deal with the sidewalks.
Okay, we have a question from Mike Starling, who wonders what's going on with code enforcement. Recently, there have been issues raised about conditions at Bradford House and elsewhere in the city. What can you say about that?
Well, in general, when I've got a citizen ask me a question about an issue, of course, I usually immediately contact Susan Webb, who's our code enforcement officer, and she has almost every time, literally, she has already been out and given some kind of notice to the property owner. In the issue with the Bradford house, probably about a year and a half ago, we had a meeting out there Susan had brought people from HUD there in the state. They had a new manager at the Bradford house. We also had Commissioner Foster was there. Mr. Odie Wheeler was there. And we had a discussion with the property owners about trying to address some issues. And one of the issues was the elevators. And because of city staff's efforts and going and continually putting the property owner on notice, they had agreed to, and I understand they've already replaced one elevator and they're scheduled to get another one replaced in the near future. And so hopefully we'll at least solve the elevator issues. As far as the other issues, it's a privately owned building, and the private owner and the person they've contracted to run it, those are the individuals who have the primary responsibility to take care of their contracts they have with the state and federal government, who provide assistance with them. Since this issue was brought up, I had contacted Susan about trying to get a hold of the HUD people about us trying to see if we can find out what efforts they have done and what tasks they have done to make things happen there. They hold a purse string. We might have a stick to try to bring them to city court, but they have the ultimate power of actually writing checks to support these programs. And so Susan and I are scheduled to meet tomorrow to talk about that issue of how effective HUD has been and what they know about the issues. But I've seen a report from Susan that she sent me on Monday where she's been out there on multiple occasions and dealt one-on-one with issues she's received with management and gotten results. And so I think that one of the challenges is when somebody's put on notice, they have time to get it resolved. We have tried to take people to court, and usually that means working with the property owner to try to get things resolved. But with COVID, we haven't had court. Court had to be held off. So now that court's coming back in session, and I think we're going to start seeing more cases being presented for action. But if somebody has an issue, they can contact Susan, and I know that she's going to respond and try to see that we can't get the issue addressed.
Okay, on a totally different matter, have you had any contact with American Cruise Line, and is there any indication of when they might start operations again?
Yeah, of course, the cruise line company is affected like the rest of the travel industry. And they are trying, the latest that they're trying to do is they've tried to schedule some cruises later this year. I think end of October, and two trips in November that they have scheduled to run in the Chesapeake that will depart from Baltimore. Each of those have a scheduled stop in Cambridge if those cruises actually happen. They have, as you know, the cruise ship has been in port at our dock longer than what they had planned on, but they are hoping in the near future to take the ship up to New York City and have a Hudson River cruise where they will go up to Albany and back. And so we may see the ship departing in the near future. They're paying a rent to us while they're there. So, and we, of course, like the prestige of people coming over the bridge, and they see that huge, that cruise ship and say, hey, this is something, we've got a cruise ship in town. But we're hoping that they're going to be able to have cruises as early as the end of October. But right now, that the only thing they have scheduled is tentatively, they have 3 cruises where they have 3 stops in end of October and in November for Cambridge.
Well, it's great to hear that they're at least thinking about starting operations again, and it's a great a great advantage to Cambridge to be involved with their services and to host their cruise ship and be a source of revenue while it's here. Patrick, what would you consider to be your greatest accomplishments since becoming the Cambridge city manager, and what would you like to do in the future?
Well, some of the things I think that we're hoping to have some real positive success. The first one, Tom, I think is we've hired TGM, the accounting firm out of Salisbury, to be our finance director. And because of COVID, unfortunately, they weren't able to start until middle of June. But we now have Tom Boland, who's a senior accountant that contracts with them, and he is coming into our facility now weekly and working remotely too, to try to help us get our finances to where we want them to be and start helping us get a timely reporting and help us with our accounting function. And we're hoping we're looking for good things from that. One of the things that we were able to do last year, working with the police chief, the local FOP president, the mayor and commissioners, we were able to, and of course with the taxpayers, we were able to set up a new rate structure for our law enforcement officers so that we were much more on par with our adjoining neighbors. This allowed us to be more competitive. And one of the positives I think is that since December of last year, our police chief has not reported any officers that have left our service. So that's been one positive, that it's been a team effort, and we were fortunate to be able to do that. Another program that we started before COVID, Mark, the police chief, and myself, we tried to come up with a new recruiting technique to try to increase the number of African-American officers on our department. And that was, we tried to get a committee of leaders in the community to get together. And we started talking about trying to recruit people, say in their 30s, that are established in the workforce, that have maybe never thought of being a police officer, that we could approach, much like you would recruit a Boy Scout troop leader or a youth leader in your church, somebody who could, we start trying to tap people on the shoulder and say, have you thought about becoming a law enforcement officer? And that's something we'll try to get going, of course, once COVID breaks up again and we're through the recession. We set up safety committees in the past year. We have one in the police department that the police chief set up, and we have Ina Holden set one up in Public Works, and they meet a couple times a year to review accidents in the department, review injuries, and try to come up with solutions. That has helped us as a part of our effort to reduce our workers' compensation claims, and we're hoping to have dividends from that further in the future. We were able to set up, the city engineer and myself, working with the Riverkeeper group. We identified sewer lines over on Cambridge Creek that the engineer put together a plan that the mayor and council adopted to try to replace sewer lines out of Cambridge Creek to reduce any potential sewer spills into that creek and improve the water quality there. And that's a project we're looking to have happen this year. That was, I think, about a $250,000 project that we had put in place. We've also we're looking now to have a street sweeper brought in. Ina Holden and Calvin Johnson and Eric Kane, we've been looking at a street sweeper. We've looked at different types, and we're trying to see if we can't get a new street sweeper. Also, we're looking to get a clamshell truck and a chipper to help us in our efforts to keep our streets clean. We only have one sweeper truck right now that's not operational full-time, and we're trying to get to a point down the road where we'll have two fully operational street sweeper trucks, and we'll be able to get every street swept on a monthly basis. I think one of the positives is we've tried to be more transparent. We've added more meetings with HPC and Planning Commission that we now have on town hall streams. We've also put more city meetings on town hall streams. 2 years ago, we put our budget on the city's social media before, as soon as the budget hearings were done, or budget committee meetings were done. This past year, we put our city budget on the city's social media prior to the first meeting of city council, the first work session to review the budget. And then the elections, I think one of the things with the elections that's a positive, by working with the county and the health department, we are going to be able to send a ballot to every household. We're expecting this to dramatically increase our participation in our city election. Our consultant, and based on what the county results were from their mailouts in the primary, we think we should more than double our participation in city election this fall, and probably have the highest citizen participation in city history. Also, our vendor's going to have, he's going to be scanning the ballots, so he'll have a record, and people will be able to visually see if somebody wants to challenge the process. And of course, we're following state law and holding this election, and we're looking forward to this being our best turnout in ever. We've worked through 2 contracts with our garbage, and we're almost finished the one with our marina contractor. We were able to get those. We're looking at having both those contracts renewed at no rate increase to the city during the next couple of years, and we're looking to have better service, hopefully. One of the things we're hoping with the marina service to even get a lower rate than we currently have been paying. We've also had, working with our local legislative leaders, we're trying to get some measures to the state legislature that would allow us other mechanisms to tap to replace fire apparatus and to keep up with the other policing agencies on personnel benefits and wages with our current officers, by doing another mechanism to receive fees other than through the property tax alone mechanism. We are also, we've been trying to work with the public, having more meetings. We had several meetings on Mill Street Schoolhouse to try to involve citizens. We've tried to get help and get participation from neighbors on Bill Burton Fishing Pier to get feedback from them on helping and be responsive to needs that they have and concerns. Also, as I mentioned earlier, with the Bradford House, and also with completing walkways, public walkways that were required over in the Deep Harbor neighborhood project area, that we had a cooperation with that homeowners group to get those public walkways completed. And then Cornish Park, we put in some grant applications last year. We learned from that process, and we're hoping to get them in our second round. And then also we've tried to do at City Hall, the old City Hall, we put in an application to improve the asbestos, get the asbestos and lead out of there. We know that's about $250,000 project, and we're trying to get FEMA money in that. And we learned from the first round. We're hoping to get another crack at it this winter. We're also going to be trying to get funds from the state to help us put an elevator in that building so we can make it more potentially marketable, either through private investment or our own investment. A couple projects we're hoping to try to do in the coming year. We're looking to try to, we hired a new economic development director, and she's working with our GIS tech person to try to develop an inventory of buildings and properties that we could potentially market for economic development. We want citizens who have knowledge and who have been involved and are had been players before they retired over on the Western Shore and in other big market areas. We'd like you to step forward and send us an email that you'd be willing to be involved in an informal coffee club to help economic development and come up with strategies with us to try to target and to market Cambridge to potential connections that you have from your former business life. And then another project we want to try to look at is potentially looking at a tree committee where we would have involve, as citizens have an interest in this. We'd like to have a volunteer committee, try to look at working with some of our private nonprofit agencies in the area to put together at no expense to the city, but through grant funding, to try to get a tree inventory of our current Cambridge tree canopy, and to try to come up with some strategies to get native trees and to for free or through grants, and to try to increase our canopy and improve it, and find places where we can plant trees to improve our canopy as a part of improving our local the aesthetics in our neighborhoods and also the quality of our environment.
Well, thank you, Patrick. There certainly is a lot going on. It's been great to have you here tonight, and we thank you for your time, and we thank you for everything that you've been doing for the city of Cambridge. It's wonderful to have you here as our city manager, and wonderful to have you in Cambridge as a resident and neighbor. Thanks very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks to radio people for inviting me.
We want to invite everybody to the next Cambridge Community Conversation, which we had on August 26th, where we'll have representatives from the Dorchester County Health Department, specifically Roger Harrell, the Chief Public Health Officer, and Dr. Casey Scott, the Deputy Health Officer for Dorchester County. And we hope to have a very exciting presentation for you, an informative presentation for you that evening as well. So for all of us here at Cambridge Community Conversations, we hope you have a wonderful week, and thanks very much for participating.